All right, I am back with another video, and today we've got a pretty fun one as we've got yet another brand new subclass to try out. Today we're going to be looking at the College of Spirits 5e mod by Ellipsoid. Now, this is a pretty fun subclass to run. It's all about hearing the voices of the dead in order to inspire your art, and I think that is just such an interesting idea for a subclass, and it comes directly from tabletop, so it's great for this channel. Overall, I think the mod is fairly well done. It gets across the mechanics that are intended while sticking to the limitations of BG3, and does so in a way that, while may seem quite powerful when you initially read a certain ability, you quickly realise that actually it's more of like a slight utility thing, but is still very good to use. It's just not as powerful as you may think. Not broken powerful, but a balanced type of powerful, which I think is really fun. And we'll get more into that as the build goes on. It also is going to give them the opportunity to do a really fun kind of multi-classing combo using another modded subclass, which, if you've read the description, you'll already know, but let's save it as a surprise for people who actually like to watch the video. But yes, no, this is going to be a very fun build today. The whole goal of the build is to have a theme of life and death, both high damage dealing as well as a decent amount of healing, as well as using both radiant and necrotic damage. We are somebody who walks the line between life and death, keeping those who are meant to stay in the world of the living alive, but also putting down those who are meant to go to the underworld. And I think it's going to be a kind of an interesting thing, the way it's turned again into like a kind of art form, like maybe because, I'll just say it, we're multiclassing into Warlock, the fact that we kind of use our patron's influence, that is like our kind of access to the other side, and like that is also like kind of where we get the ability to hear the dead spirits from, and they kind of give us advice on how to go about our business. Like, imagine basically making a kind of magic Grim Reaper type character who also heals and literally hears the souls of the dead telling them how to be a better Grim Reaper. That's kind of like the vibe I generally got with this build when I kind of saw the class abilities and how to use them, and I actually think I've come up with something pretty damn cool that I think if you're into using these kind of modded builds, then I absolutely recommend you give this a try, because again, it's nowhere near broken in the slightest. In fact, you'll be seeing from the combat footage now that I actually had to bring someone else along, because solo this build doesn't really work. It's meant to be a support build. It's meant to shoot big damage attacks from the backline while, you know, allowing their frontline fighters to stay on the battlefield with massive amounts of healing using its abilities and spells. And overall, it does work really well. It's kind of like a cleric, but done in a different way that has like a different type of utility. And overall, I think it works really, really well. It's also charisma based, it's also a bard, so it's fun to be the face of the party with this one, a bit more so than a cleric in my opinion. And I do think it works out quite well. I think it's an interesting combination, but it definitely had trouble in solo encounters. I would say it was a bit squishy because, again, we're pretty much a full spellcaster for most of our levels, so it does kind of give us like less of an overall hit die, and obviously our defenses aren't as great, but we can still take quite a few hits. We do have a few sources of temporary HP with this build that do help, but otherwise it was a bit squishy. And again, there's not really much point of me showing a support-focused build that is meant to support the other members of your team without having at least one other person along. I've done it before in the past, and it's fine. And I did say, like, as like for your overall DPS, it's still going to be quite high on a turn-for-turn basis, just because of the abilities that you have. But you are going to be squishy. You are a glass cannon that can heal. That's basically what you got going for you. So when the Steel Watcher and the two Flaming Fist guards decided to all attack me at once, it didn't go very well in solo testing, but I did try it out at various different levels of play, and I would say, especially in the early to mid game, this build is quite consistent, but when you hit that late game, you are going to be relying on your teammates to keep the heat off of you more and more. Anyway, long tangent ahead. I think you guys get done, I should say. There's no more tangent, don't worry. Just to kind of get the idea of the build across, and I think you guys will enjoy this one, so let's get into it. Kicking things off, we are going to play as a high elf today. This is purely an aesthetic choice. I like the idea of the person who walks between life and death also walks between two sides of society and life, so I went with half elf, but to be honest, tiefling obviously also works, but I did like half elf specifically for the civil militia feature, which is going to give us access to shield. shields. Now, we do wear clothing with this build, but we can use shields with it, and that extra 2 AC is going to feel quite nice. While I've not included the shield as a required part of this build, I do have a recommendation for one, but it's not 100% necessary if you want to choose to just play a different race that doesn't come with shield proficiency built in. But I do like the idea of playing as like somebody who gets shield proficiency in some way in order to get it just for that AC bump if you want, but obviously it's not required and I didn't use it in my testing, but it could be nice. But alongside that, we're also going to get the regular Dark Vision and Fey Ancestry, which is always nice. Moving on, I did go for high half elf just because we get that extra cantrip, and I'm going to take Friends. We are a charisma character, it makes sense to take this. Obviously I've got the Mistress spell mod installed, which is available to everyone, which I do highly recommend for this build as it does elevate the build in a slight way. All of the mods that I do use are linked in the description below, so if there's a spell you don't recognize or isn't usually on like the spell list for the class, that's where, just in case people comment. Moving on, our starting class is going to be a Bard today. Technically, you can start as a Bard or a Warlock, doesn't really matter, but I like starting as Bard more because it gives us more skill proficiencies, and that's what I want. I also do want the simple weapon proficiency as well, which Bard also gives us, which is great, because we are using a quarterstaff today. But as a Bard, we're going to get a bunch of stuff like 2 cantrips, and every good Bard should take Vicious Mockery, because, I mean, if you're playing a Bard and you're not insulting people, you're probably doing something wrong. As well as Mage Hand, because it is a generally useful cantrip, but really, feel free to take whatever you like, except for Light Cantrip, because we will be getting that later. Moving on to our spells. Again, this is kind of a free choice kind of scenario, but make sure you take Healing Word as one of your spells, because this is one of the only ways we can get Healing Word on this build, and we're going to get things like Cure Wounds another way. So I've gone for some typical utility stuff, Featherfall and Longstrider just for enhanced movement, as well as Command from the 1D&D spell list revisions, because it is genuinely a great spell to have that I like on this build. But really anything can work. Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Dissonant Whispers, Speak with Animals, Disguise Self, all of the fun utility stuff that Bard gets, you can use here, no problem. So really, other than Healing Word, it's a pick your favourite situation, but again, I do like the generic kind of support options. For our starting instrument, pick what you like. I went with Violin, and for our abilities, we have the following. Strength is at 8 because we don't need it. Dexterity is at 14. This does make our AC a little bit lower, but I've stacked enough equipment that boosts up our AC, but it's not a huge deal. You're going to be finishing this build at 18 AC without a shield, so that's pretty good. I preferred having more Constitution for that little bit of extra HP and better concentration saves, because quite a few of our spells are concentration based. Intelligence is at 8 because we don't need it. Wisdom is at 10 because I'd rather have it at 10 than 8 because wisdom saves are crazy. And charisma is at 17 because we're going to bump it up with a half feat later. Moving on to skill proficiencies, I went with the oh gosh, which one's is it the Guild Artisan background that comes with History and Persuasion? I think it is. I'm pretty sure that is. Let me know if I'm wrong. But also I've just gone for Deception, Intimidation and Performance, so we have the whole charisma suite. I would say Religion does also work here, but we'll have the opportunity to grab some more skill proficiencies a bit further down the line. Right, next up, we are going to take a quick 1 level dip before we come back to Bard as part of the level progression of this build. We're not gunning for something like extra attack here, so taking this 1 level dip is pretty safe. As I said, we're going with Warlock. Warlock is going to give us a few things, namely it's going to give us our necromancy side of things, so we're going to be able to pick up something like Bone Chill and Toll the Dead, which is always great to have. Moving on to our subclass, you may see we've got an extra option here. We're going with the Celestial. Because what's better for, you know, seeking a connection with the afterlife than making a pact with something from the heavens? I know that's technically not what Celestials are, really, but come on, like, just let me have this one. Anyways, so, the reason I've gone with Celestial here is because it's going to give us a ton of interesting things. We're going to get Cure Wounds and Guiding Bolt, so that's healing and radiant right off the bat. We're going to get a unique healing feature that has its own separate, you know, point system from spell slots, so we have a bit of extra healing with a new resource, as well as it's going to give us the Light and Sacred Flame cantrips. All of this based off our charisma, making it perfect for Bard, rather than going for a Cleric multiclass, which is still viable. You just might need to use the Gloves of Dexterity or something, and put those extra points into Wisdom instead to make that work. Life Cleric could also work if you don't feel like going the Celestial route. However, the reason the Celestial is also really fun is because it's going to give us some extra cool things as well, like an enhanced spell list and some features later on that are going to fit this build so perfectly. But taking this one level dip now is not only going to get us this kind of basic kit for healing and damage dealing, it's also going to give us some Warlock related dialogue options, which I think works really, really well. So yeah, we're definitely going to be playing on the light and dark thing on this build as well, which is great. Moving on, we do have some spell choices, and the game has gone for the expanded spell list options, which I'm not going to argue with. I want both of these. Cure Wounds obviously being a pretty standard great healing spell for this game, as well as Guiding Bolt being a really solid damage option, especially in the early game. This is why we kind of wanted to take this one level dip of Warlock as well, because Guiding Bolt is just that good. It's also going to make it so the next attack roll against the target has advantage when it hits, and again we have a super high charisma score, so it's going to hit quite a lot. The Celestial mod also does come with an introduction, because this is not the same Celestial mod I've used in past videos. This is the one that's more accurate to 5e tabletop. I've used both mods in the past, tested them both for this video, and while I do like the other mod and I think it works well for the BG3 implementation, this one is more faithful to tabletop and does come with a few extra features that I think some players might like, even if I didn't use them in this build specifically. So there's a little blurb if you want to read about the mod itself, but I highly encourage you to try this one out, and we must agree to continue. First time I've played a mod that comes with like a terms and conditions. And now we're going to go back to Bard for our levels for a while, because I want to focus on the Bard stuff first, because it is the newest. We're going to get Jack of all Trades and Song of Rest, the pretty standard Bard stuff, but of course Bard locks love this game because you get to play Song of Rest, which is going to give you 3 chances to recover your Warlock spell slots per short rest, per long rest I should say, and this is going to feel really, really good as you play throughout the game, so it's nice to get this as early as you can. Moving on, we do get to choose another level 1 spell, and again, it's really up to you what you want to pick here. I would say we've gotten pretty much everything that I would personally want here, and again, this whole build is kind of a pick your favourite on the whole spells scale thing, so really just do whatever you like here. I mean, I would say I kind of like just having Dissonant Whispers because it's just a fun spell anyway, and it causes fear, which, I mean, if you've got like this character saying they're going to send you to the hell, I mean, yeah, you know, you're probably going to be a bit scared. Moving on to Bard level 3, we get to choose our subclass, and there it is, the College of Spirits. This is quite a fun one. College of Spirits. You seek tales with inherent power, be they legends, histories, or fictions, and bring their subjects to life. So, our first ability here is Tales from Beyond. Call on the spirits to tell a tale through you. Now, the tooltip obviously doesn't tell us much here, but I'll explain what it does. As with a bonus action and the cost of your Bardic Inspiration die, you get to basically trigger a wild magic surge. You're going to get a random beneficial effect added to your character, whether it could be a spell or feature that you can cast later, or an effect that happens immediately. And a lot of the times these are really beneficial. It's got its own, it uses the Wild Magic Surge table effect from Wild Magic Sorcerer, but it's got its own unique table. And I understand that some people might not like the randomness of this sort of thing, but I'll tell you now, I think it just adds a lot of character to the build. And I think it's just like a thing you might do like once every short rest or so with this build. I think it is quite fun. But again, you could do it as many times as you have Bardic Inspiration die, and by the time this build is done, we'll have 5 per short rest. So you'll get to do this quite a lot. So have fun with it. If you like Wild Magic Sorcerer, you're gonna like this subclass. We're also going to get Guiding Whispers, which is essentially a version of Guidance that has a longer range. This is like this was basically kind of what the feature was in tabletop, but this has just obviously been adapted to BG3, so you got another character that can use Guidance, even though we're not a Cleric. You know, now that I think about it, we've kind of just made a Cleric that uses Charisma in a really roundabout way. It always comes back to Cleric. Moving on, we do get to choose a level 2 spell at this point. Now, for my personal lore and flavour and all that, I did go with Lesser Restoration or Aid at this point. I think Aid will be quite generally useful across the campaign, as you will be just kind of giving, by the time this build is done, like 10 extra hit points to your allies, as well as the fact that you can recover that level 3 spell slot used to do that on a short rest as well, of which you have 3. You'll be able to give out this buff pretty consistently without really wasting the resources to do so. So I think 10 HP, while it's not the most Aid is ever given out on any of my builds, it's still better than nothing, and I do think it fits the vibe of this build pretty well. Again, this comes from the 1D&D Spell List Revisions mod. If you're trying to make this build, use all the mods I've linked in the description. As well as College of Spirits lets us grab a couple of skill expertise, which is kind of nice. So it's kind of up to you what you want to say here. I like grabbing history proficiency because, again, someone who can talk to the spirits of the dead probably can get a little bit of knowledge of history as well. I also like persuasion here too, but intimidation also feels like it fits. So pick your favourite. At Bard level 4, you're going to gain access to another cantrip. I like Minor Illusion here because it can set up some shenanigans, especially if you've got a rogue in the party. We're also going to get to choose that other level 2 spell, and because I do think it is like the most fitting for the character that I'm building today, I am going to take Lesser Restoration. Not everyone probably thinks this is a very useful spell at all, but again, you can just pick your favourite. Whatever you think fits the theme here works. I'm leaning a bit heavily into the, the healing side of things at the moment, but obviously there's options like blindness if you want to lean into or hold person if you kind of want to lean into that like darker, more offensive side of things. Again, choose, it's your build. We also do get to choose our first feat at this level, and we're going to scroll all the way down to Tasha's Feats and take Shadow Touched. Again, Tasha's Feats available on all platforms. So this is going to allow us to bump up our charisma to an 18, as well as select an extra illusion or necromancy spell, as well as gaining the invisibility spell, which can be used once per long rest without using a spell slot, but can be cast again with subsequent spell slots. Same with the spell that we're going to get from here. And I decided to go with Inflict Wounds. It's just another great necromancy spell that deals a lot of damage. It is touch range, but still I think it works quite nicely. But you can also go for False Life or Ray of Sickness. I think both work, but Inflict Wounds did feel like it was the best option overall. Again, kind of like what Cleric gets. Huh. At level 5 of Bard, we are going to gain access to Font of Inspiration, allowing our Bardic Inspiration to recover on both a short and long rest, and that Bardic Inspiration die is bumped to a D8. So, while we're not using Bardic Inspiration in the traditional sense like Swords Bard or Law Bard necessarily would, so this is mainly only going to affect our regular Bardic Inspiration, but that Font of Inspiration is what we're really here for. We also are going to get to choose a level 3 spell at this point, and again, thanks to 1D&D's updated spell lists, we gain access to Mass Healing Word, a really good AoE healing spell, which is going to work great for us. We're not going to be able to upcast it because it does require a level 3 spell slot, but it is going to trigger abilities from our equipment, and it's a nice top up for everyone on the team if they need it, especially if you've got multiple downed allies, so I do still recommend picking it up. And at level 6 of Bard, we're going to get Counter Charm, which is okay, but we do get the main subclass features, which is what I'm here for. And as you can see, we've got a lot to talk about. So first up, we get two amazing features. We get Spiritual Focus Damage and Spiritual Focus Healing. Our damaging spells will deal an additional 1d6 damage of their respective damage type, and our healing spells will restore an additional 1d6 hit points. Now you may be thinking, that's broken. It really isn't. In the grand scheme of things, a lot of our healing spells are, in the sense of Mass Healing Word, at base, only going to heal 1d4 plus our modifier. It's an extra 1d6. This isn't even coming close to what something like a Life Cleric is capable of. Maybe if you went all the way in this Bard and were able to upcast those spells, then yeah, maybe it has a bit more influence, but overall, it's not a huge deal. I would say that this is perfectly balanced. I would say the damage side of things can definitely get a little bit crazy. If you manage to get like Magic Missile on here, then yeah, obviously you're going to be outputting a lot of extra damage, and that is a bit of an oversight, but overall it's pretty balanced. A lot of our spells we're only going to be casting one per turn because we're not really using haste here, as well as the fact that in addition to this, a lot of our spells just hit once. So that extra 1d6 of damage isn't going to be necessarily making or breaking a lot of situations, but again, it does play nicely into the theme of life and death. We get a bit more damage and a bit more healing. But the other thing that we're going to get is Spirit Session. You can temporarily learn a divination or necromancy spell from any class once per long rest. So the game has gone ahead and pre-selected a bunch of these spells for us that are, or the mod I should say has done this, that are from level 3 or below. So you gain access to things like Hunter's Mark, Animate Dead, Ray of Enfeeblement, Revivify, False Life, Vampiric Touch, which is what I personally chose. You just get more overall options for spells that you wouldn't normally get, and the fact that you get to change it every long rest is kind of nice. So overall, I quite like this feature. I think it's very thematic, and I think it works well for the build. You just have a lot of extra options that you can tailor to certain situations as you go into them. The long rest restriction can be a little bit awkward, but you could basically long rest as much as you want in this game, so it's not a huge deal overall. And I think all of these spells fit the build really nicely, so I'm happy to have this feature. We also do get to choose another level 3 spell, and in my testing I actually gave Motivational Speech a try. You can motivate up to 5 creatures. They gain a +5 temporary hit points and advantage on wisdom saves, and if an affected entity is hit by an attack, it has advantage on its next attack roll. So overall, this can be a nice kind of way to kind of bump up all of your allies and get a bit more out of it, but it's entirely up to you if you want to go down that route. I actually do think Speak with Dead does make sense, and you can learn this from obviously the spirit session as well, but I think you're mainly going to want to use that for other spells if you can. I mean, maybe you want it the other way around, maybe you just get it from that feature and have something else on your main spell list. I don't know, it's entirely up to you, but I do think Speak with Dead makes sense on this build, so you're going to want to take it at some point either way. Now at this point we're done with Bard levels and we're going to go back to Warlock. Now, again, you can kind of take the levels in any order here. If you want to turn this into an Eldritch Blaster character, you can go for the second level of Warlock a bit early to get that Eldritch Invocation, but otherwise you don't have to worry about it too much. So, we do get to choose another spell, and obviously I'm going to go with Arms of Hadar. It's another Necrotic spell. We're also going to get the chance to choose 2 Eldritch Invocations, and as you can see, there are 2 new options. These were added by this Celestial mod, and from what I understand, these aren't from tabletop, so I haven't actually included them in this build or my testing, but I will discuss them for those who may be interested, as this is kind of a mod showcase. So, we have Bearer of the True Flame. Your ability to channel celestial energy strengthens your sacred flame. The flame becomes so pure that it instantly deals additional fire damage and ignites creatures it touches with Sacred Burn for 2 turns. In addition, once per turn, you can use a bonus action to rekindle the Sacred Burn or a recently extinguished one to its full duration on one target and try and spread it to other enemies. Basically, the Sacred Burn means that the creature is burning in sacred flames and it takes the tooltip's a bit bugged. It takes some amount of radiant damage per turn, and any fire spell damage inflicted to it by the Bearer of the True Flame also reignites the flame for 1d4 damage, and the damage increases at levels 5 and 10. Basically, it's a fun little extra flavor thing that makes Sacred Flame a bit more useful since it comes baked into the subclass, but since it's not actually part of the original tabletop, I'm not going to include it here. You also get this as well that makes it so targets have disadvantage against saving throws on Sacred Flame as well, and it applies with this as well. So this is some fun extra homebrew that the mod author just let included as well, but you don't actually need to take it, and I didn't because I don't know how exactly powerful it is. I mean, if I tested it I would, but I didn't really have time, so feel free to play around with that if you want to make Sacred Flame pretty good. But obviously I've got some different options for you here. I ended up going with, let's see, I went with Armour of Shadows because we need mage armor on this build, and obviously Fiendish Vigor does make sense, but we already get False Life from so many other sources, and Devil's Sight is just generally more useful. Again, if you're an Eldritch Blaster character, feel free to take Agonizing or Repelling Blast, but we're not today, so you can just kind of choose what you like. At Warlock level 3, we're going to gain access to another spell. This time we get to choose from level 2 spells as well. Celestial Warlock does give us access to Lesser Restoration and Flaming Sphere added, Flaming Sphere, I should say, added to our spell list, so feel free to pick those if you like. I kind of prefer Hellish Rebuke though. I just like it because it's quite a unique spell, and it will help us deal a bit more damage with our reaction if we get attacked, so I think it works out. We also do get to choose our Pact Boon at this point, and as you can see, there's another option here that is Homebrew. Pact of the Chain Celestial Extended. You can gain the service of a familiar, like normal, but you also get the ability to summon a Holophant, which can, you know, cast like Bless, Protection from Good and Evil, and do a little bit of extra healing, and will be able to create light that could potentially blind enemies. And it does actually level up with you. So again, it's another extended option that's not actually from tabletop, but could be a fun expansion on the mod if you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to be going with Pact of the Tome here, or you could go with regular Pact of the Chain, if you like. But Pact of the Tome would give us access to regular guidance, which we kind of already have. Thorn Whip, which is a nice extra cantrip, and Vicious Mockery, so I guess you didn't need to take it at the start, but you can respec that out if you want. Otherwise, it just gives you a few extra options, as well with some additional spells later on. Moving on to Warlock level 4, we do get to choose another cantrip, and at this point we kind of have most of the things I want, so I do like to go with Mind Spike. Deals psychic damage, which is not often resisted, and applies a negative 1d4 penalty to saving throws until the end of your next turn. So you can make it so that our spells that have saving throws, which is quite a few, make them a bit more effective. The anti-bless, if you will. Bane, I guess. But hey, you know, it's a nice alternative cantrip to have if you really want to make sure you get off a saving throw. Moving on, we do get to choose another spell at this point, and I do kind of like Darkness with this one since we did get Devil's Sight and it kind of feels on theme, so we'll grab that here. We also do get to choose another feat at this point, and I would just say take an ability score improvement and bump up your charisma to the max. At Warlock level 5, we're going to get our Deepened Pact, allowing us to gain a few new spells, which is Animate Dead, Haste, and Cool Lightning. Animate Dead obviously fits the build. Haste can be a really useful thing. Maybe you're infusing someone with a bunch of life energy and it makes them go faster, a la Giorno from Golden Wind. There's also Cool Lightning, which is just kind of here, but it exists. The main thing we're here for is our level 6 subclass feature. Your patron empowers your healing capabilities. When casting Healing Light, which is our healing ability that we got at level 1, the target regains additional hit points equal to your charisma modifier. So overall, it's just now a really powerful healing spell that doesn't actually use our spell slots. What the game forgets to tell you here for some reason, I think the mod developer needs to fix this, is that you're also going to get resistance to radiant damage, and any radiant or fire spells that you cast add your charisma modifier. Now, we've not focused that hard on the fire side of things, but obviously we have a pretty powerful radiant spell option in Guiding Bolt, meaning that not only are we getting that resistance, we're also going to be able to do massive damage with radiant attacks. So our necrotic damage may feel a little bit lacking in this sense, but our equipment will help with that as well. But overall, now we have powerful radiant attacks, powerful necrotic damage attacks, and healing as well. Like, we've just got the whole package, which is what this build was going for. Speaking of, we now get to choose another level 3 spell, and you could take Vampiric Touch here. There's also Revivify for another powerful kind of like, you know, spell, but we can get that from our Spirit Cooling, Spirit Session thing from Bard. So I actually did go with Arms of Hadar. While it's not necrotic, it does feel like it's on theme for the build, so I wanted to grab it here. We also do get to pick up another Eldritch Invocation, and I always like to take Mire the Mind, because Slow is such a great control spell. And you could even flavor Slow as, you know, you're draining the life out of your opponent, making them sluggish. Yeah, no, that's kind of a cool feature. We also do get another feature at level 6. Ah, no, sorry, here is the Radiant Soul feature. My apologies. This is what gives us resistance to radiant damage and the additional damage equal to our charisma modifier. My apologies, you get that at level 6, not level 5. That's my fault. I'm an idiot. Pretend that didn't happen. I apologize, Ellipsoid. That was my fault. You know, the mod is working as intended. It's a Monday, it's been a long day at work, leave me alone. Moving on to our spell selection, we do get another level 3 spell, and we might as well take Vampiric Touch here so we don't have to use our Spirit Session to get it, but otherwise you could use your Spirit Session to get it, and take Counterspell instead, if you so choose. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is the best of both worlds when it comes to healing and damage. You've got two amazing damage types to focus on, that being Necrotic and Radiant, which both are not often resisted. Necrotic will be resisted a little bit more once you get into Act 2, and in fact, this build may struggle with Act 2 if you're playing on Honor mode, because obviously the Act 2 enemies have that Radiant Retort thing, where they reflect Radiant damage back, but otherwise, this build will be really strong in a lot of situations. And besides, at the end of the day, you are a healing machine. You've got multiple different ways of healing that can use your easily recoverable spell slots or your own unique celestial energy points for massive amounts of healing. You've got the ability to give yourself and your allies more HP. You can assist them with bardic inspiration, and you can get a ton of interesting other buffs. In fact, let's see what we get. From Tales of the Beyond, Wild Magic Surge. You can give allies two allies a D8. A D8 of what? That's the only thing I will say that this mod really could improve on is two allies, 8 temporary hit points. Okay, there you go. So really, this mod does need to fix its tooltips. There are a lot of typos that need to kind of be sorted to make this mod a bit more readable. Otherwise, it is mechanically, it's very sound and does a lot of interesting things, but it does need to fix this issue with the kind of tooltips and such, because there are a lot of typos and errors. But once those are fixed, this mod will be very, very good, and I do think mechanically it's a great representation of the tabletop system, so I'm happy to include it here. But yeah, as I said, you got tons of healing, tons of damage, tons of utility. This build does it all and is great at support, which is what it is built to do. It is not built to be a frontline fighter. If you go in there just expecting to take every hit and just heal it off, that's not how this works. You need to keep yourself in the back line, doing big damage with long range, keeping up the battlefield control with things like Hadar and such like that, and then heal when necessary. And again, these buffs are random. You're going to get some good stuff, you're going to get some okay stuff. Most of it is beneficial, you just got to work with what you have. But you have a lot of adaptability, a bit able to learn different spells for different situations when the need arises. So you really just have to play your cards right and know how to go into each situation, determining what's going to be best each time. But yeah, overall, you've got a pretty good skill set, so let's look at the equipment. First up, for my staff of choice, we have the Staff of Cherished Necromancy, because of course we do. Creatures have disadvantage on saving throws against necromancy spells. That's a huge buff for a lot of our stuff. We also gain the Life Essence Harvest. Whenever the wielder kills a hostile creature with a spell, they greedily absorb its energy and gain Life Essence until their next long rest. Life Essence means that it can use that essence to cast any necromancy spell without consuming a spell slot. So even though we have less overall spell slots because we took Warlock levels, the fact that we have so many short rests to recover those spell slots and potentially have the ability to cast necromancy spells without consuming spell slots, by the time this build is finished, you're going to be extremely resource efficient. It's also a +2 staff overalls and has an extra 1d4 of necrotic damage, so if push comes to shove and you need to bonk someone, you can bonk someone. But overall, this is just great for boosting up our necromancy stuff to kind of bring it up to being on par with our radiant stuff in terms of damage and overall options. I mean, at the end of the day, we only really have 2 strong radiant damage options. There wasn't really opportunities to take much more. Otherwise, most of our stuff is healing and necrotic. But hey, Guiding Bolt, really all you need. When you got this much damage, if it would actually show it, yeah, you can't be too mad at that. Right, can we turn back around, please? Thank you very much. Back to what I was actually trying to show off. So, but for the early game, we've got quite an interesting option. We've got Creation's Echo. If the wielder deals acid, fire, lightning, radiant, or necrotic damage, it becomes resistant to that damage type for 2 turns. This is a great way of getting the damage resistance to radiant early, as well as gaining necrotic damage resistance, which otherwise we actually don't get on this build. So I thought it has a nice little touch for an early game staff, but obviously you're going to want to upgrade when you get to Act 3. Moving on, we do also have that shield option I was talking about earlier. The Shield of Devotion will give us a +2 to our AC, an additional level 1 spell slot, and a casting of Aid that's not actually going to take up a spell slot as well. So if you only need 1 casting of Aid per long rest, but you don't actually need to take Aid as part of your spell list selection from earlier, you can just get it here instead. So if you do use that shield, you can take Aid off your spell list, but I thought I'd point out that it exists because obviously you can equip it. I will also quickly use the Mage Armour spell to show that with the shield you get a total of 20 AC, and without it you get 18. So overall you can have pretty solid AC with this build. Anyways, moving on. Wapira's Crown is our headpiece of choice. When healing another, the wearer regains 1d6 hit points. So as long as we're doing plenty of healing, we're also going to gain a bunch of healing back. And yes, I do believe this does work properly, I think from my testing, with our extra healing feature from College of Spirits Bard. So you get more healing on top of your healing, which is always nice. Moving on, you've also got the Mantle of the Holy Warrior. I decided to just choose this because the idea of using Crusader's Mantle to give all of our allies radiant damage, like we're spreading the radiant damage that we can do to our allies, I don't know, it just feels nice. It allows their weapon attacks to deal an additional 1d4 of radiant damage, and you can use this once per short rest. It does require concentration though, but to be honest, we haven't really got a lot of concentration spells. I mean, there is haste, but we can only use that once per long rest, and I guess Vampiric Touch is also a concentration spell, but otherwise we're pretty concentration free. Where is Vampiric Touch? There it is. So yeah, you can actually kind of use this pretty freely, so I kind of like it for this build. Moving on to our cloak, we have the Potent Robe. This is just going to allow both our bow what's it called? Yeah, Bone Chill, I was right, and Sacred Flame to do additional damage equal to our charisma modifier, which is great. And at the beginning of the wearer's turn, we gain temporary hit points equal to our charisma modifier and a +1 to our armor class. This is overall a great robe to have, and with the black and jade green dye, which is a vanilla dye as well, I think it just looks excellent for this build, so I'm quite happy to have this here as it just boosts up everything we do quite nicely. For our gloves, we have the Wondrous Gloves. Your armor class increases by 1, amazing, and in addition, if you have Bardic Inspiration, you gain 1 more use of it. This is also awesome. In fact, if I short rest really quick, you can see we get that back, so even though that weird message appeared, we still get that back. That's just a tooltip error. But yeah, this gives us 5 Bardic Inspiration per short rest instead of 4, and of course, because that allows us to do all sorts of extra shenanigans with Tales of Beyond, it just works really, really well for us. So yeah, there you go. And finally, didn't really know what boots to put here, so I decided to put the evasive shoes here for that extra bit of armor class, just to bump up with that lower dexterity. Moving on to our accessories, we have the Periaptive Wound Closure. When downed, you automatically stabilize at the start of a turn. We have control over the domains of life and death, so death will not take us easily. We do not need to make death saving throws. Also, we have Potent Healing. Whenever we are healed, you restore the maximum number of possible hit points. So we are going to be able to keep ourselves up with healing fairly consistently, which is great. This works with our Wapira's Crown feature, which means anytime we cast a healing spell, we instantly gain 6 HP. That's pretty good. Moving on, this is kind of a fun interaction. Whenever the wearer deals spell damage while illuminated by a light source, so just being outside in the sun, you can also inflict Radiating Orb upon the target for 2 turns. But as you don't know, Radiating Orb makes it so the affected entity has a -1 to attack rolls for every turn remaining, and you reduce the duration by 2 each time the entity makes an attack. This can help both you and your allies' survivability. You call on your celestial abilities to, spread out light across the battlefield, making it so your enemies are more likely to miss, meaning that your allies can tank a bit more, which means your healing will be a bit more effective. It's a pretty minor effect overall, but I thought I felt like it fit the build quite nicely. You can change this one out if you like to something like the Ring of Salving for even more healing, but I did like this kind of flavor plus how it kind of synergizes with the rest of the build, so you can change this one, but I like it here. And of course, of all healing builds, you've got to throw the Whispering Promise on there, giving everyone you heal a free bless. You can't go wrong with that. You throw out a mass healing word and all of a sudden the whole team is blessed. That's pretty good. But yeah, that is the build, and what can I say? I like the flavor, I like the mechanics, it feels good but not too powerful despite what it looks like on paper, and it makes use of 2 really interesting subclasses that I don't get to use very often. But again, both of these mods are available to all platforms, and since it's all from tabletop content, I highly recommend giving it a go. I feel like despite the obvious thing with like the typos and the tooltips, I do think the College of Spirits mod does genuinely work really hard to make a tabletop accurate version of the subclass in BG3, and I highly respect the mod creator Ellipsoid for making it as they have. So overall, great stuff. I think it's a great mod, and I'm really happy to see its implementation. Also, shout out to the Celestial mod creator as well for making a genuinely great mod to pair with this. I feel bad because I actually didn't get their name. I totally forgot. Nihilus89. 2 amazing mod creators who have gone above and beyond to create some amazing mods for the community based on tabletop that I think are great for build making because they're actually bloody balanced. Again, they may seem powerful, but put into practice, they're not that bad when it comes to breaking the game, and they really don't either. I think they actually do an amazing job, and I highly recommend that you give them a try, whether you're on PC or console. Right, that is going to do it for me. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.